Welcome back. So in this third and last part of this conference, we will talk about the Treasury Centralization and FX in-house bank concept and the way to increase efficiency and enhance internal controls related to the FX management. And I'm the pleasure to welcome John Macaigne from Kantox. So could you just introduce yourself and Kantox for those who do not know yet Kantox?
Sure. So thank you, Francois, and thank you for having me. Kantox, a bit of history. We were founded in 2011, but there was a big turning point in 2016 when we basically created a new product category called Currency Management Automation, which I will obviously be a bit exhaustive about it today. I will explain. Yeah. And for myself, John Macaigne, I am the team lead for the French market, representing the sales at Kantox.
So I know that you have a slide. Do you want to maybe move? Yeah. Okay. So maybe you would like to first introduce a bit what Kantox is doing before starting with questions.
Yeah. So I mentioned the concept of currency management automation. What is it? I will start with an extremely simple definition. Currency management refers to all the tasks and processes related to currencies that a company has to perform in its day-to-day. And currency management automation, so this product category that we basically created, means that our mission is to develop solutions that allow the customer to automate the entire FX workflow from end to end. The concept of automation is quite simple. It relies on the ability of the customer to exchange information automatically, and to be able then to act on this information without any manual intervention. How can we achieve this automation? Quite simply with, for example, an API connection, by connecting our software to any type of ERP or any type of TMS, therefore being able to push this currency exposure automatically, and finally by executing the FX policy of the client in a robust and systematic way.
So your link to the, let's say, system to manage the underlying business could be, I don't know, exposure in foreign currencies, I guess, whatever the solution they use to try to get the information when the risk is created or arise, and try to get access to the information as soon as possible, because time is really an issue in terms of FX management, to make sure that the solution could edge automatically 24/7, I guess, and then feed the TMS or ERPs or other system with information dealt by the system.
I think you summarized it really well, Francois.
Okay,
exactly.
But you can execute, but you are not necessarily there to execute. You can pass through the banks of customers.
Yeah, the idea is to be able to collect the information about the exposure, whatever the exposure is for the client, to treat this exposure thanks to a set of predefined business rules within our solution, and to automatically execute the FX policy, which means actually executing the forward contracts, whether it's with Kantox or redirecting the execution directly with the banks of the client, which allows us, because we have the information about the exposure and the information about the actual trades, to give back this information either in a TMS or in very detailed reports that the client might ask for.
So you complement the treasury management system for this specific part, because treasury management systems are not necessarily in general fit for doing that automatically.
Yeah, the treasury management system can have a lot of use for reporting purposes, but cannot act as a proactive engine in order to apply and execute the FX policy of the company.
And I guess it's quite important, because I mentioned the time being a real issue. So having companies, and I know that you are quite active in the, let's say, travel sector. So when you book your trip to New York over the weekend, I guess it's an exposure for the company, for the booking.com of this world, and or Expedia or whatever. So I think it's quite important for them to edge immediately one-to-one the transaction to be more efficient. That's the idea.
It's true that the travel industry was a really strong industry for us at the beginning, but let's say that any type of industry, as soon as they generate FX exposure, they are at risk. They have generated an FX risk. So the idea is to be able to capture this exposure in real time and to neutralize it as fast as possible in order for the margin to be fully protected.
And we talk about Treasury Centralization, it's quite important, but when it comes to Treasury Centralization, so how could you help the international group to generate this FX exposure across multiple entities? Because, of course, we've mentioned some companies having activities, Koch mentioned 70 countries, so it means a lot of currencies, maybe not necessarily 70 currencies, but how could you try to help having this kind of in-house concept for FX and centralization?
I think an intro before explaining how we can help would be interesting to explain what kind of challenges these multinationals are facing if they're not centralized. So decentralized treasury means that the subsidiaries all around the world will manage their FX exposure locally with their local banks. So what are the three challenges that are related to this type of setup? The first one would be cost related, okay, because by definition, each subsidiary is going to have smaller volumes, might have, let's say, a limited negotiation power with their local banks. So maybe they're not going to have the best spreads. Obviously, the headquarters could negotiate better spreads. The second challenge is that, obviously, the group is missing an opportunity on netting or natural compensation. If I have some subsidiaries who are selling some dollar and others who are buying some dollar, then the group is executing a higher volume of trades than necessary. So they're spending more money than necessary. The third challenge, which is the most important in my eyes, is purely risk management related, because the headquarter has no visibility over the FX exposure of its subsidiaries, but also no control over how the FX policy is actually executed. Right. Some subsidiaries might do it perfectly well. Some subsidiaries might not do it so well, and some might not do it at all. So these are the challenges we're trying to tackle. And in order to overcome these challenges, well, companies do resort to treasury centralization, and in particular to FX management centralization. Let's say the holding company decides to centralize treasury. What is going to happen naturally is that they will aggregate the volume of trades of all the subsidiaries. So they will have access to better conditions with their bank, lowering their fees, lowering the spread. Maybe also doing this side business is going to help them to lower the cost of their financing. I don't know. Netting. We talked about netting. It's impossible if the subsidiaries do it on their side locally, but if the group is aggregating all this data, they have this arbitrage, they have this opportunity. They can proceed to this natural compensation and hedge, buy, sell currency, only the net exposure, what they need. So more savings on that side. And finally, if they're the ones receiving the data from the subsidiaries and they're the ones actually trading on their behalf, well, they have full visibility over the exposure of the subsidiary, and they know the FX policy is well executed because they're the ones who are executing it. So these are the benefits of actually centralizing the FX management.
And I guess you can manage different strategies. So because depending on the underlying businesses or underlying assets, the strategy could be different. So with different exposure, so you can apply different strategy for different class of assets and make sure that the machine will perfectly align the execution to the strategy defined by the company.
Exactly. So when the HQ decides to become this in-house bank, they're going to trade on behalf of these subsidiaries. Obviously, if they're, let's say, equipped with a tool such as ours, they can decide, the machine can be programmed to apply a specific program of hedging per subsidiary, depending on the activity, depending on the type of exposure that they have. This is completely something imaginable, to have a fine-tuning of the parameter of the tool and to,
And so the concept of FX in-house bank, it's the way to centralize everything and to make sure that everything is completely coordinated and harmonized and aligned with the policies across the world.
Yeah, we're talking about centralization. What does it mean in practical terms? It means, we mentioned the term, but the headquarters will play this role of in-house bank. Mm-hmm. So instead of the subsidiary managing their FX and going through their banks, doing an external trade, now the subsidiaries are going to have to request an internal trade to the in-house bank, which is going to play the role of the liquidity provider for the group. What will the headquarters do that? They will be the ones to execute the external trades with their banks, guaranteeing at the same time a hedged rate, or let's say a forward contract, for their subsidiary, which means, that the headquarter will have this effect of aggregating the volumes, lowering the spreads, and having this visibility and enhanced control over the FX policy.
So you will automate two operations, the one with the affiliates and the one with the bank.
Yeah, so in the end, this is how can Kantox help, because we've assessed that being the in-house bank allows the headquarters to lower the fees and also to have this enhanced control and visibility. But what we're seeing on the market right now is that we don't have that many headquarters who play this role in in-house bank. And the question is why? Why is it a struggle? The real answer is that it's not that easy to have this setup of in-house bank. What we see with companies that do it, usually, I wouldn't call it archaic, but the flow would be the subsidiary sends an email to the headquarters with this internal trade request. Mm-hmm. Then the treasurer has to validate this internal trade request, give a phone call to the bank or trade on whatever platform this hedge, and then confirm to the subsidiary that the trade has been passed, give him the trade details, monitor all of this and put it in a report, which is usually Excel. Fastidious. It's like a lot of time-consuming, error-prone, manual labor. So in the end, a lot of companies do not want to use.
You touch a big point. So I do not see the value of a corporate treasurer for let's say, renewing, rollovering a transaction, because sometimes it could be tons of transactions depending on your strategy. But if you have a one-to-one approach, that could be tons of transactions, especially with B2C businesses, by the way, where the volume could be completely. And if you try to aggregate, so the risk is to be not 100% efficient. Another concept that you mentioned, the dynamic hedging. So could you further explain what you mean by dynamic hedging, and when it comes to, let's say, more exotic currencies, what do you propose for customers?
Dynamic hedging is basically the module that allows us to connect to any information system, an ERP, a TMS, and to extract this exposure data. So if we relate this to an in-house bank, for example, this would mean connecting to the ERPs of the subsidiaries or even the centralized ERP of the group and managing to receive all this exposure data, understand all these internal requests that would go from the subsidiaries to the in-house bank. Mm-hmm. And then instead of doing a pure back-to-back model, let's say the HQ receives an internal trade request and automatically hedging it with their own banks, which, by the way, this would not allow to do some netting if we're doing a pure back-to-back model. Mm-hmm. Our tool, Dynamic Hedging, basically you set it up with a few business rules. These business rules, they translate your FX policy. So the idea with our tool would be to receive all these internal trade requests, and instead of hedging them mechanically in real time, we could do what we call the book holding, which means that we would not, in back-to-back model, go straight to the market to hedge what we've been receiving. We would hold the position, and we would monitor the P&L of the headquarters in order to allow the headquarter to receive more internal trade requests from other subsidiaries, and therefore allow this netting. The idea is that the P&L of the headquarter is under control because we are monitoring the market and their open position, and all the manual processes obviously are eliminated because we're not talking about sending some emails. We have the data directly coming from the information systems. This is how dynamic hedging would be able to.
When you have currencies with high differential of interest, so maybe you can also monitor in order to avoid the fact of being impacted by the swap points, and let's say monitoring closely the exposure to make sure that in certain circumstances you decide to cut and to have a stop loss in place. So the machine could also manage the monitoring of these specific currencies with high differential of interest.
Yeah, you're right. And I would say it with other words. I would say that basically, in order to automate, we need to set up predefined rules. And this will be always the decision of the client to understand, to tell us what is his tolerance in terms of value at risk, what is his tolerance in terms of cost of hedging, forward points, differential of interest. So all of this can be translated into this set of business rules. in order for us to receive this data automatically. And then within these own sets of tolerance that the client has defined, that we make sure that the policy will be applied systematically in line with what the client has requested.
And in terms of technology and trends, so where would you say that the Treasury Centralization fits with the current financial trends?
For me, it's quite obvious that digitalization is automation is a trend. We see numbers all the time. Treasurers, CFOs, they embrace it. I think they put it at the center, for many big companies, at the center of their strategy. So yeah, I would say embrace it. I'm from within, so obviously I'm going to say this, but for me, I always have at heart the best interest of the client. I'm frustrated when a client doesn't believe in the solution because automation, digitalization, not just Kantox, all the companies, it's here to help the treasurers save some time, be more efficient in how they pilot their risk management. So yeah, it's obviously a trend, and I'm happy to be part of it.
When you meet potential customer, you try also to evaluate the return on investment in this automation of FX management.
Yeah, of course. Now we know that decisions to acquire or not a SaaS solution is very economically driven and rational. So we always propose to do a business case based on the actual data, historical data of the client. We analyze a bunch of different KPIs like value at risk, 4-point savings, time savings, and in the end, the ROI speaks for itself.
And I also understood that you on top provide some interesting reports when it comes to IFRS or financial reporting.
We know that IFRS reporting, hedge accounting can be a real hassle. So yeah, when I say our mission is to automate all the FX workload of the clients from end to end, we really mean it. So even the production of the hedge accounting, all these testing, production of the documents, we also automate this part.
So very interesting. And so you have further questions, do not hesitate to discuss with John and get more information about this very interesting and useful solution. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, François.